All right, well, I think we can get started. So hello, everyone, and welcome to Trends That Will Shape Dentistry in 2023. This live event is brought to you by Intiveo and Liine. So thank you all for joining us today. You are in the right place if you are a dental professional at a practice of any size or specialty in any role, and you're looking to gain some insight into trends that will shape your practice over the next year. So if that's you, we have some great insights planned for you today. Also, to introduce our speakers, so we have some awesome speakers here for you today. So Charlie Wynn, the CRO of Liine, and Josh DeVries, the CEO of Intiveo. And I'll briefly pass it over to them to introduce themselves. So Charlie, can you give us a bit of an introduction on yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Charlie Wynn. As Jen mentioned, CRO at Liine, also one of our co-founders. And if you don't unfamiliar with our business, we have a platform that uses speech analytics AI to analyze all of the conversations a practice has with new patients. And so I bring that up because we're going to share some insights today that are pulled directly from all of the actual interactions that the practices we work with are having in the market with new patient leads. So hopefully some of that information will be really helpful as it's from the primary source. Josh?
Thank you, Charlie, for the wonderful introduction. So I'm Joshua DeVries. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Intiveo. Intiveo is the patient communication specialist for healthcare professionals. If your office has complicated and complex communication needs for your different procedures, we can help make your patients show up prepared for their appointments. Whether it be new patient forms filled out, insurance documents submitted, pre-medication taken, or fasting instructions abided by, let Intiveo help you serve your patients better.
Great, thank you, Josh. So briefly, we'll go through today's agenda. So first we'll look at, wrapping up 2022 and seeing what 2022 had in store for us last year. Then we'll look ahead to 2023 and some trends that are coming in the industry. So from Intiveo, we'll go through talking about, keeping patients top of mind using patient communication, as well as attracting new patients through digital marketing, and also how to accommodate your dental patients in the new year. And then we'll go to Liine, where we'll talk about what are the benefits of measuring staff performance. Then we'll talk about automation and why it's necessary to book more patients. And then we have some juicy industry benchmarks in patient acquisition. So be sure to stay through to the end because we have some awesome stats and benchmarks for you. And then near the end, we'll have some time for Q&A. So if any questions pop up during the course of the presentation, please enter them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen there, and we'll have time to answer some near the end. So with that, let's kickstart it, and I'll pass it to Josh to take us away.
Thank you, Jen. So we'll look back on 2022. So for a lot of us, 2022 was a landmark year in a lot of senses. It was the first year where it truly felt like there was a new normal being implemented and rolled with. And, whenever we have a disruptive year, it's important that we look back and take measure of what worked and what can be improved. So we're going to jump through some of the things that we noticed in 2022 and how we would best prepare for 2023 and the years to come in light of those interactions. So the first thing that we noticed, and the primary thing we noticed, was a mass migration to the dental practices towards digital communication. Throughout COVID, there was a definite need to provide different means of communication, more communication around the requirements of a successful appointment, and this is now becoming the new expectation across practices. For many dentists, they were caught off guard with the new level of communication required. And they really just looked at the first solution they found that could help solve some of their problems. Now, depending on the dentist's needs, the service they chose, and what it actually concluded with, there was varying degrees of success in those new initiatives. However, the important thing is that everyone found a way to serve their clients in a safe and effective manner. And now we are entering a new era of dental practices where this is now the expectation, and providing patients with a digital means to communicate and a digital means to submit the required paperwork is non-negotiable. I think one of the things we're going to chat through here today is what are some of the tactics in which we can better enable these workflows from a more digital perspective. Now, here's a real client comment that we've talked through with them. And what they've said here is Intiveo has allowed us to add an additional layer of communication that helps us build a better relationship with our patients. And what Dr. Sharma is really saying here is that text messages aren't just about being a reminder. It's about further communicating the requirements to ensure the successful outcome of the procedure. And through that, building a stronger relationship with your patients. It's really important that we have a strategy in how we want to communicate and that we embed that strategy inside of our messages to give your patients a constant experience that's delightful and that is convenient. The next thing we're going to talk about is when we enable a digital communication strategy, we are going to have an improved efficiency and growth through automation. Now, there is a lot of factors that go ensuring a dental appointment is successful. And these days, dental offices are having to do more with the same or less as what they used to have. Now, one of the things that's really important to think about as we try to take a hold of all of these changes is what are we required to do to ensure the successful outcome of a procedure? Now, there are some things that happen in the dental office which are unavoidable and really you do need to have your hands-on attention with. And this could be questions that patients have. This could be welcoming them into the clinic. This could be following up with them on the checkout process. However, if we actually take a look at the entire customer or patient journey throughout their treatment plan, you will notice there are some things that are redundant, that are repetitive, that we should look at automating or making simpler to communicate. Now, some of these things can be done through software, but other things can be done just through simple hacks and tricks. One thing that we talk about is consistently looking at the top 5 procedures we're performing. What is the level of requirement for the patient for those procedures to be successful? Meaning, do they need to confirm that appointment? Do they need to have any forms filled out? Do they need to have their insurance information submitted? Are there pre-meds or fasting instructions? And then creating templates to communicate with those patients about the requirements that are needed for this appointment to be successful. So this can be done, like I said, through some software, but also can be done manually through really investigating what the patient-customer journey looks like and how we can optimize it and make it more efficient. Now, when we do that, as you'll see next slide. What you can see here is automating our process has been a game changer and saves our staff so much time. We are now able to automatically text and email patients across our 3 locations instead of doing this manually. Now, what page from Constega Oral Surgery, my apologies on the brutal pronunciation there, is really getting at is that when we deliver this, it has 2 effects. A, it saves the practice time, which is really important because you need to have more communication going out more now than ever so before. But the second thing is it requires you to really think about the communication requirements and to create a plan to automate. Now, when you do that and you have a plan that's all encompassing, meaning you understand from the first visit all the way to the last visit what's required, you are able to automate it and save a tremendous amount of time for your patients and for your staff. Now, what this all leads up to is that there is a shifting of patient expectations in the dental industry, and we have to be aware of what those shifts are. One of the things that we're seeing is that patients are wanting to have more convenient ways of communicating. Simply returning a voice message is no longer going to be acceptable. They want you to be texting. They want an email. If there's any questions, they want you to be available on the phone, but they don't want to be tied to the phone in order to have that communication transpire. Now, there was a recent study that shows that 71% of patients are more likely to search for your practice online and read reviews before making an appointment. So it's really important that we are really making good on these expectations. So they're going to tell others about it, and that information is going to be online for new patients to find you. And the reality of the matter is, if we're not going to focus on doing it, other offices will, and that's going to be their opportunity to serve patients. And in 2023, we need to really understand how are we going to compel our patients to continue working with us for their oral health care. And this kind of transitions us into what to expect for 2023. Now, in 2023, we need to be much more cognizant of the technologies we're using and what we need out of our partners. Now, all of this should be focused around how do we keep patients at the top of mind. So when we think of this first trend, we always want to understand that patients are like other consumers. They want to feel appreciated. They want to feel like their business is earned and that they are being treated in the best way possible. And the way that we can do it is that we need to be constantly communicating across multiple channels. This is going to be done through being present through their actual treatment, but also through the pre-communication requirements. And when we do this well, it really leads to having happier staff, because staff are no longer required to do more with less. They're actually having a partner to help accomplish some of their goals. Now, in 2022, we saw the highest number of job vacancies across every single industry, and dentistry was no different. The demand for dental care has not stopped. In fact, it's increased, and many practices are struggling with how they can serve their patients with the limited resources available to them. Now, the communication requirements at the same time have also grown exponentially. Patients saw what was required during COVID with virtual check-in rooms, additional information, surveys or forms that need to be filled out. And that level of care and quality is expected to continue. And how can we do this? Well, we have to give our staff better resources and better tools to serve our patients. And really, we need to think about what is the best use of their time, which in our opinion is the face-to-face interactions with our patients. This can be the live pickup calls on the phone or in-person interactions at the office, ensuring that their check-in and check-out goes as smoothly as possible. The second thing we want to talk about is convenience being key. Never before has there been an expectation that you are going to make a dental or healthcare appointment convenient for a patient. They want to understand what are the requirements for this procedure, what do I need to know, and they want to make sure there's an easy, convenient way for them to execute on that plan. Now, what we have found internally is that depending on the request is going to depend on how we need to communicate. An example would be if you want a simple confirmation, a text messages may be fine. Or if you want to remind them to take their pre-meds right now, a text message is going to be fine. However, if you need a patient to do something more cumbersome, like fill out a survey or submit an online form or provide you with insurance details, email can often be the more convenient resource or medium. And it's up to the office to really have a plan that makes it convenient regardless of the interaction you need to have with your patients. Now, the next slide we have here talks about the ability to automate the sending of pre-op and post-op instructions for the exact procedure has been great. Patients now arrive more prepared for their appointments. And Brianna, is really talking to the fact that when we look at these procedures in isolation and we understand what the requirements of the patient are for that successful treatment outcome, we can then give them everything they need in a timely manner. And obviously for oral surgeries, the requirements are going to be much more robust and complicated. However, this is just equally as important for regular procedures and appointments. Things like pre-medication alerts, things like surveys and forms prior to the appointment. All of these things need to be tailored to the patient and their procedure to be effective. Because when you have the patient's attention, you want to make sure you're getting the appropriate response. Next slide, please. And all of this is going to lead to keeping patients more educated and more engaged. So one of the things that we have found is that with the shifting expectations, there is an appetite for patients to be more involved in their oral health care. Patients are wanting more information on their treatment. They're wanting to understand what their different options are, maybe due to financial constraints or other reasons. But finally, they're also interested in how is this procedure going to work? What are the practical steps in order for me to have a successful outcome of this treatment? And we now need to be experts in communicating these expectations and educating the patients on the importance of completing treatment. The next slide. And then finally, when we have all of this, planned out and mapped out, it's ensuring that we send the right message at the right time. Now, this couldn't be more important. Patients are becoming more busy. People are working remotely. They're less likely to be available on their cell phone. What are the ways in which we can ensure that the practice is getting everything they need before that appointment starts? And, the way that we have found is having a detailed understanding of the patient journey. So for this procedure, 2 weeks before, we need their patient intake form completed. We need their pre-appointment survey filled out. We need their insurance information. 1 day before, we need them to have already confirmed their appointment. We need them to take that pre-medication. We need them to start their fasting instructions. 1 day after the appointment, we would like them to fill out a quality improvement survey. When your organization has a really clear understanding of what is all of the requirements, designing a plan for you to communicate that information at the right time through the right medium is critical. And it's really what gets you the best results. Now, all of these things really lead to attracting and retaining new patients. And the best way to do that, or the most convenient way to do that, is through digital marketing. One of the big things that we talk about quite consistently is this idea of social proof. How are new patients finding you? How are they hearing about you? And how are you converting them? Sorry, the next slide. And one of the ways that we found is through social media. It's not going anywhere. People are still looking to Facebook. They're looking to Google reviews. They're looking to other mediums like Yelp to find reputation of the services they're utilizing. And dentistry is no exception of this. What we have found is that traditional mediums such as radio or newspaper or television are becoming far less effective, and that patients are more trusting their inner circles through social media or the public review sites for their impression of a practice, because that is crowdsourced, that is real. Those are practical responses and reviews of the dental clinic. So it's really important that every single practice is present on social media, that you're having a good idea of what's being posted, and that you're able to monitor that content and promote it when necessary and when appropriate. The great thing is, if you do it well, there's a virality of it. A friend says they had a great experience, you share it on social media and you tag that patient that posted it. Now their network sees this endorsement, and it has a great effect for the rest of their network. Our online reviews have doubled in size over the 6 months. Giving customers the freedom to submit a testimonial in their own time not only removes effort on our part, but we also believe it gives patients a more comfortable means to submit feedback. Now, what Dr. Sadhu is talking about here is really just that, the ability to follow up with patients and get that online review and not be a manual process at the front desk has two benefits. First, the results. Much more patients will leave a review if you make it easy for them, meaning sending them a follow-up message, give them the link right to the review site, and encourage them, if they had a positive experience, to leave a review. The second thing it does, it also gives you the ability to not be in the way and be controlling over those reviews. You don't need to have a constant reminder out of that checkout process saying, please leave a review online. You can leverage the technology to remind them to do it after the fact. And we've seen the results prove that that's a much more effective and a much more comfortable way to solicit reviews. Next slide. And like all businesses, it's really important that we are nurturing our patients continually. What we have found is that there are going to be different ways and means of which you can engage with your patients throughout the year. The most practical way is often going to be during the appointment, the check-in process, the procedure being completed, the checkout process. It's often going to be through the communication in between appointments. But there are other ways that we can engage and nurture our patients. And, that could be involved with, practice newsletters, informing them of what's going on throughout the year, even in between appointments. It could be engaging through meaningful content and education through social media or online, having, a constant voice that is adding value to patients' day-to-day lives. Or finally, finding different ways to engage in the community. Is there a parade or a fair or an event that you can have a booth or you can have a presence and you can, show patients that you are invested in this community and that they should invest in your healthcare because of that. And all of that really leads to nurturing your patients. And it sounds like a lot, but if you're not managing the digital aspect of it, you now have more time to focus on the in-person aspect, like events, like, the in-office experience. And that all comes through really automating and leveraging the technology to do some of the digital stuff for you. And then finally, as we implement anything, it's really important that we create feedback loops for our patients. Our patients have seen a tremendous change in the last 5 years around healthcare, what's expected, how do we deliver this care, how do we communicate it. And when we're doing these rapid changes, it's important that we have a feedback loop embedded. Now, some institutions or some practices, they do that through simply asking patients, how was your visit? And that's going to get a very cordial response, as most people are not wanting to have conflict or not wanting to bring up, negative experiences. What we have found to be super helpful is embedding a feedback loop that's automated through, a newsletter, a survey following the appointment. When you ask for feedback about a procedure and you're not talking to a human, you're much more likely to get a non-biased perspective of how that appointment went. And, in our system, we have a surveys report, which allows a patient to answer customized questions and rate their treatment or rate their response within that procedure. And that's super helpful for you to understand what's working and what's not working. But regardless of how you choose to embed that feedback loop, it's more important that you have that feedback loop in place. And I know Charlie's going to talk about it with Liine, is that's another way where you have a feedback loop of, you're having conversations day to day with patients, hundreds of them. And, what is the feedback loop for you to understand that you're doing it correctly, or where there's areas for you to improve or to better direct those conversations. So all of this really speaks through, the importance and the need of having those feedback loops. And then really what it all boils down to is, how do we better accommodate your patients in 2023? Our trend for the day is, how do we do this? And, we've worked with Liine to provide some content as well as some follow-up material on how we can better leverage the patient experience. And here we're just going to go through some final takeaways. First and foremost, we need to simplify the communication process. Now, this seems like it could be something that is very difficult, but it's really important. What we need to do is we need to understand that every treatment is different, and the requirements for that process or that appointment need to be specific and unique. But when we think of our procedures as individual treatments, and each of those has a communication process, we can start simplifying the message and the requirement for the patient around that appointment. It's also going to make you stand out to the competition. People are going to recognize that you truly value their time, and you really value, and you're a co-author in ensuring that the successful treatment of their procedure. To recap, really what we've talked about here today is digital communication is slowly becoming the norm for modern dental practices. If you want your patients to show up prepared for their appointments, your practices need to actively keep patients top of mind, not just through digital communication, not through just in-office communication, but through all means. And this could be through, newsletters following up. This could be through community events. There's many different ways, but we do need to stay top of mind, because if we're not, someone else will. And then when it comes to retaining our current patients and attracting new ones, we have a lot of tools and resources at our side. Making sure we have the social media accounts and that we're active on them is super important. Making sure that we're keeping patients included in the loop with marketing efforts through newsletters is also really important. And then finally, and I think most importantly, is ensuring that we have the appropriate feedback loops embedded in our practices to make sure that patients' responses and struggles are being corrected and improved upon. So with all of that being said, we do have a little bit of a gift for you to kind of take some of these suggestions and roll up your sleeves and implement them at your practice. So one of the things that we'll be passing along is 5 trends that will shape dentistry in 2023. And it's a much more practical, hands-on look of how you can leverage some of the technology available or how you can optimize some of the things manually. Now, all of these things do take a significant amount of time, but these are investments in the future. And, this is the time to optimize what is working and what's not been working over the past couple of years to ensure that, the new normal is better than what it's been. So we're super excited to share this with you. And I'm also super excited to pass the microphone or virtual microphone over to Charlie. Now,
Thanks, Josh. Awesome. Thank you very much. You can go next slide there, Jen. Cool. So we're going to talk about really two things, I guess, and then share some benchmarking data that hopefully will be helpful. And the first one is the benefits of measuring staff performance and why you should be doing it. So this is a topic or a concept that a lot of people talk about, but they don't really understand how meaningful this really is and how important it is for you to focus on. So as a trend or sort of a big piece of strategy for 2023, based on what we've seen across all of the practices that we work with, staff performance, and in this example, your staff's ability to handle new lead interactions and provide a really good patient experience and book the initial appointment. That is what I'm referring to as staff performance. So next slide, Jen. There's really 3 main benefits of this. The first is what we refer to as clarification of goals and purpose. And here's what I mean by that. Let's say that your practice hired me as a member of your front desk team or whoever is handling those initial calls to schedule appointments. And on the first day, I said, what am I supposed to say on the phone? That's probably a difficult question to answer. Or you can flip it. And what if you were to go ask all of your front staff or the people in your office that are handling new patient calls, and you said, hey, when you answer the phone and it's a new patient, what is the purpose of that call? You probably would get different types of answers. Everybody would probably say something around patient experience, or around treating people well or something like that. But really the goal of that initial conversation should be focusing that conversation on scheduling. That is the reason that your team is answering the phone to speak to new patients. And so by establishing that and clarifying that as the purpose of that call, there's tons of benefit into it. And then your team has the same priorities, right? If everybody's on the same page and there's sort of a common language around what their focus and responsibility is handling phone calls, that's really powerful. That's going to help you to help them to be more effective on the phone. And that also establishes a culture and communication amongst your team that really is going to help them improve. Second benefit of measuring staff performance is you can uncover things. So whether it's on an individual basis or across your whole team, you can start analyzing and understanding when your practice is not successful at booking an appointment. Why did that happen? Because that represents an opportunity, of course, to make an adjustment, change the way that your team is communicating to have more success in scheduling people. So if you're not recording and monitoring any of your calls, we totally recommend doing that. Listening to your team is fine if you're able to hear what they're saying in the office, but you're only hearing one side of the conversation. So if you can dig in and get some granular information or examples of what's happening, especially when they're not booking people, then that's gonna clue you in on those opportunities for improvement. There's a little graph here on the bottom right of the slide that is pretty astounding. And what it's showing is the spread between the worst performing staff members in the country, again, at booking new patients for appointments, as compared to the best. And the takeaway here is the best is 81.5% conversion rate. The worst is 29%. So the difference between the top and lowest performing staff members is over 60% in their conversion rate. And what that means is the way that a staff member decides to communicate with a patient, decides to handle that initial conversation, has an enormous influence on whether or not that patient schedules. And again, staff performance is a well-known concept and discussed by many people, but I don't think most people understand statistically how meaningful that is. And so when you are measuring staff performance, you can start to figure out, man, is there anyone on our team that is just way below everybody else with their conversion rate? And if that's true, then you can maybe identify areas for improvement with them or for training, or maybe it's just not a role fit. Like we find a lot of practices, especially with challenges in the labor market that I think Josh alluded to earlier, they're putting different staff members that in sort of hybrid roles, which makes sense, right? You get more efficiency or more capacity rather out of those folks. But sometimes you put someone on the phone who just for whatever reason shouldn't be on the phone. So if you're not measuring staff performance, you're not going to understand if that's happening to you. And then the third piece under what data allows you to uncover is praise. Josh also talked about happy staff, happy patients. It was reminding me of happy wife, happy life is that little phrase. But when you get information on your staff performance, not only are you looking for the things that are going to help them improve, you can make your team feel appreciated. A lot of times we feel like the front staff at the practice are sort of like unsung heroes when it comes to the business because they play a critical role in the patient journey and in the patient acquisition process. They make the first impression. A lot of times they're doing a lot of different things up there at the front. They may be checking people in and checking them out, handling existing patient calls, certainly new patient calls, and it's challenging. So any opportunity that you can have to show them that they're doing well or catch them doing something right, just making them appreciated is extremely powerful. And you can't do that if you don't have a way to measure staff performance. And then the third element here is running your practice like a business. This is a little more all-encompassing, but in any other industry, when leads are reaching out to a business, inbound leads, one of the most important things and one of the most measured things in those organizations is this initial lead to appointment process. So it's a standard, well-known business practice and a best practice to be able to measure. You're able to streamline things if you start measuring this, because going back to the clarification of goals and purpose, let's say your practice is in a growth mode, whether you're just hiring more people, in your location or a call center, maybe you're acquiring or opening, new locations and you have new staff members that aren't physically with you, that presents a lot of challenges. So if you've got a process to measure performance around this and clarity of how your staff is supposed to handle these conversations, it makes onboarding new people a whole lot easier. And then finally, most people aren't doing this. Again, something that's talked about all the time, but we find that the most commonly practices just really have no idea what this conversion rate is. They probably know how many appointments each of their team members is booking because they've got that in their EHR, their scheduling system, but they don't know how many opportunities those people are missing. So that other end of the equation is important. And if you do this, you are going to have an advantage over other practices. Next slide, Jen. Necessity of automation. A lot of overlap between what Josh and I are talking about today, and he spoke about digital transformation of communication and simplifying communication with your patients, especially after they've booked an appointment. The same is true sort of at the top of the funnel where we're talking about, where needing to have automation in the way that you engage with and the way that you follow up with new patient leads is becoming not a nice to have, it's a need to have. Next slide, Jen. And so there's a couple different points I'm going to make here. I'm going to focus on the web leads, where when a patient is on your site, they're filling out a contact or request appointment form as opposed to picking up the phone and calling the practice. And so there's this concept of speed to lead that is really important to understand. So when a patient submits that inquiry online, usually it goes into an email inbox. A lot of times it's shared, info at whatever your practice website is. And then your team is supposed to be monitoring that and following up as quickly as they can. Well, what we found is, people are so busy that if you don't call them within 5 minutes of that inquiry, the chances that you even get them on the phone drop. Harvard Business Review did a study on this years ago, and they found if you call a web lead within 5 minutes, you're 1,000% more likely to get them on the phone. So huge advantage if you can do that. And there's different technologies. Our system allows you to have this auto call that helps you do this, but there's different ways that you can at least automatically alert your staff outside of just an email that a lead has come in. And on the bottom right, there's a stat showing the difference between conversion rates of web leads when your team is able to reach out within 5 minutes. So for the average practice across the country, if a web lead is followed up with greater than 5 minutes later, the average conversion rate's 19%, and that goes up to 55% if there's a call made in the first 5 minutes. So again, huge advantage to connecting with and converting more web leads with speed to lead. And you really can only do that with technology and automation, at least on a consistent basis. And then the second element here is staff efficiency. So going back to the web leads as an example, a lot of practices aren't measuring what's happening to those web leads, so they don't really know what the outcomes are. But people that are, we find the most common way is with something like a spreadsheet, right? They're putting people's information in an Excel file or a Google sheet, and the team is going in and manually, logging that they called that person and, oh, they didn't pick up and I left a voicemail. So now I'm going to, remind myself to call them again. Any piece of technology that you can find that can automate those little steps of logging or tagging things is going to have a massive benefit for you in the long run. Again, we talked about challenges with the labor market a few minutes ago. You want to try to get more productivity, out of the people that you have. So with limited capacity and time, technology helps with that. Also, if you are, having your staff manually update the outcomes of leads, then you run the risk of having errors. They're human beings, so they're gonna make mistakes and forget to do things. So if you're capturing data that way and making really important decisions, there's a big risk there. Anytime you can use technology to automate that piece, that's going to be a win. And then this sort of goes along with the training, variation of staff expertise. If you're a practice that's growing and you have manual processes to follow up with and convert web leads, that is more difficult to train. So you're going to have more effort, more time getting the new folks up to speed, as opposed to using technology that's going to automatically do that for you. I just realized how different, Josh, me and you say process. Next slide, Jen. Okay. So we talked about measuring staff performance and the speed to lead and automation for new patient booking. Now we're going to look at some benchmarks. I gave you some data, but people ask us about this all the time and want to understand sort of how they stack up to what's typically happening. One side note that I'll mention is typically we find a lot of practices don't know what their version of the metrics are that I'm about to show you. So if you're in that boat, that's okay. In 2023, you should definitely find a way to measure this, because as I mentioned before, most people are not doing it. So just finding a way to measure your performance metrics is going to give you an advantage, because you're going to know where you stack up against other people. And then you're going to find out the things you need to focus on to improve your process. Next slide, Jen. Okay, so lead to appointment conversion rate. So a new patient is reaching out to your practice, has not been in for an appointment, and it may or may not schedule that initial appointment for the first time. Overall, the average practice is scheduling 62% of their leads. And usually when we say that, people think it's shockingly low. Why? Because they don't measure it. So they don't have any idea what it really is. But people have a tendency to inflate what their conversion rate is in their mind because they don't have any visibility into the people that aren't booking. So it makes sense if all you can see are the people that are booking, you're going to be biased towards thinking that basically everyone who reaches out books. It's just not true. Within that 62%, the average conversion rate for patients who don't have a referral is a little above 44%. Patients who do have a referral, almost 65%. So that makes sense, right? You would expect people with referrals to convert at a higher rate than non-referrals, but still, when people hear that 64.8, 65% referral conversion rate, it seems really low. So what is going on? That's the next question of why is this happening? Jen, next slide. So these are the top reasons new patients are not booking an initial appointment. We've got two let's see, charts here, one for general dentistry and the other for specialties. So we'll start with general dentistry. The most common one is a Medicaid related element where they're calling in trying to use some type of insurance that is connected with Medicaid that either isn't accepted or there's just sort of some scheduling protocols that make it difficult. Caller procrastination is pretty common in general dentistry, and that means that a patient is calling in. A lot of times they might have a question about insurance or cost or something, and the person answering the phone is not focused on scheduling. We talked about clarity of purpose and goals in the staff performance slide. So if they're not focused on scheduling, they'll get caught in just answering questions. And then the patient's like, okay, thanks, let me give you a call back, or awesome, I appreciate it, bye, right? A lot of these conversations are short, and it's just the person is not giving you a specific reason, but just does not book an appointment. Out-of-network insurance, pretty self-explanatory and probably expected. One of the things when you're recording conversations, and if you can find a way to tag these, then you're able to understand, what are the most common plans, right? Maybe there's nothing that can be done, but maybe there's, reason to go reopen the conversation with certain payers, or sometimes, right, new employers come into the area and there's new plans that you didn't know about. So that's one that really worth looking into. Scheduling issue is the patient is trying to book, and then just for whatever reason, the staff is unable to really get them solidified for a time. There's a lot of reasons why this might happen, but sometimes we've noticed it really isn't something that the staff is doing improperly. There's a lot of times where the dentist or the oral surgeon is, I'm trying to think about how to say this, finicky about their calendar. And they sort of make the staff feel a little bit gun shy about trying to focus on getting people into the office if they're asking for certain days or whatever. So that's a big piece. And then staff taking a message is the staff gets a question and doesn't know what the answer is and feels like that they can't help the person book. So then they have someone else call back. So those are some of the definitions there in the breakdown with general dentistry. All of those, it looks like, are the same in oral surgery. They're just flipped a little bit in terms of which ones are the most common. So these are the reasons why, right? Even when people are calling with referrals, super common that we hear like someone calling to an oral surgery office. I was at Dr. So-and-so's office. They told me I need to come see you. I've got this issue. Do you have any time this week or early next week? Oh, well, the first available is actually going to be January 5th. Now, maybe sometimes that's true, but it is incredible how common that is. And not only is that not a good experience for that referred patient, that information, of course, can get back to the referring source. So again, tracking these types of things has massive benefits because, of course, you don't want to have any issues where your referring sources are worried about their patients not getting in. And we got one more slide, Jen. Josh also talked about social media and digital marketing. Huge. You've got to keep focusing on that. That's going to become bigger and bigger over time. There's a huge trend of sort of the consumerization of healthcare, right? So patients are acting like consumers and doing their research and so forth. So outside of referrals and people that are like directly typing in your website, meaning they probably were referred, these are the top marketing channels across both general dentistry and related specialties. They have the same stack rank, but a little bit of a different complexion in terms of percentages. Organic search can be tough because there's, other things that are sort of embedded in that. But that just means that a lot of people going on a search engine like Google and looking for something related to a service that you offer. Facebook, we're actually a little bit surprised by this one. We know that social media is really important, but like with general dentistry, almost 33% of all the non-referred leads are coming from Facebook. And I think what Josh said about social proof, that is, the main source of that type of action, where people are getting that social proof and figuring out where they're most comfortable reaching out to get their needs taken care of. Pretty significant in oral surgery and other specialties as well. And then paid search is the third most common, which is pretty even between the two. So hopefully that benchmarking information was helpful for you. Again, if you don't have these numbers for your practice, that's okay, but I would make that a priority for 2023, along with making sure with that information that you can look at your staff performance metrics for the benefits that we talked about, and using technology and using automation to help your practice be more effective and more efficient at following up with web leads. That's the example that we used. Not only are you going to have more success in converting those leads, but you're just going to get more capacity out of the staff that you have. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. That was great. Thank you both, Charlie and Josh. Those are amazing insights. We now have time for some Q&A, so some questions, and I'll pick them out here. So please still feel free to add some more questions if you have any, and we'll get to them. So firstly, along the lines, Charlie, of what you were just talking about in terms of booking appointments, do you think it's a good idea to incentivize staff to book those appointments? And if you do, or have you seen any programs that work well in this area?
Yeah, 100%. You should incentivize your staff. I mentioned the unsung hero concept. I think it's so true. So highly recommend it. The most, in terms of programs, being able to incentivize staff for every booked appointment is the most effective I've seen. A lot of times people will do a bonus quarterly or something related to just like overall revenue. I'm not saying don't do that. That's also helpful. But if you want your team to focus on every single interaction, that is the way that they should be incentivized. And sometimes people ask me, well, what about if the patient doesn't come in? My opinion is don't worry about that. Don't incentivize them like a dollar amount or something that, makes you really vulnerable to that. I would get them really focused on scheduling appointments. And then if the team or if the individuals are having an issue with no-shows or something like that, then A, you need to talk to Josh and his team, but B, you can deal with that, right? You can figure out like what is happening in these conversations and make adjustments. Don't lose fact of the power of your team focusing on helping people schedule.
Great, thank you. So I have a question here for Josh. What is the value of an already established dental practice creating a digital presence now?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think, there's a lot of dental offices that have been doing quite well. They have an established client base. They, don't have very many openings throughout the day. What is the real value in them investing in the online presence is a good question. I think, there's two sides of it. There's more and more dental offices opening up everywhere. And, the need for you to distinguish yourself from someone else entering is important, because people who are opening new practices are thinking about, what technology are they leveraging? How are they investing in the community? Typically they're using large ad spends, and they're going to be trying to take your customers away or your patients away through any means necessary. And when you have a mature social presence, you really are establishing a group of people to advocate on your behalf that although there may be something new and shiny out there, this is a practice that has continually met and exceeded our patients' expectations over the last 10 years. And I think the more history you have online, the more reputable your business is upon first glance, and the more likely that your patients are going to share with other friends. You know, if you're not online, it becomes increasingly more difficult to refer people. For, you know, how many times I've seen on Facebook for a friend or a relative asking for a recommendation at a dental office, and everyone just simply copies and pastes their social media link to as the referral. And if you don't have that availability, you're missing out on the opportunity to receive that referral in a meaningful and manageable way. So I think the need is always there. And I think it's really important that you do it now and not later, because when you need it, often there's going to be a ramp up time required, and you're not going to have that time. If you do it today, it might take you 6 months to really have an established network going. But now you've built a defense that anyone new comes in, they are now the person that is unknown, and you are the known quantity. And now all your patient experiences are public for everyone to see.
Awesome, thank you. We have another question coming in here around like what exactly paid search is. So I think a lot of people might not be doing paid search quite yet. I'm not sure which one of you is best to answer this one, but I think it's good to explain some of the context around paid search.
What do you prefer, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a super big dog in this fight from a marketing perspective. I think, you know, paid search is great for awareness and presence. I think for new practices, it's mandatory. You need to get your name out there. You need to get your brand out there. And paid is just going to guarantee more eyeballs are on your business. Charlie, I'm not sure if you have any other perspective. Obviously, for you, paid is going to trickle right more to the metric that you track and measure, which is incoming new patients. So maybe you can give some insight.
Yeah, I think so. And also just to make sure on the definitions, the organic search that we showed, that is, SEO strategies where people are just typing in, services and things that like you want to rank high on. So that doesn't that's not like an ad that you pay for. That is like the health of your, searchability, if you will, online. And then a paid search is really like an ad. So when people are typing in, teeth cleaning or implants, you can buy the space, if you will, for like your ad to show up above the search results. And that's what paid search means. So, I think there's certainly merit in both of the strategies. Probably also depends on what specific, services, we're sort of talking about. Like if you're an oral surgeon, maybe it makes sense to engage more so in that with dental implants, just because dental implant cases are super high dollar, right? So those are good questions, certainly to ask your either internal marketing people or agencies that you work with. But that's the main difference between paid and non-paid.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, paying to rank higher definitely can be really impactful. So I would recommend, there's a couple of different search engines, Google and Bing are a couple. You can get started with a Google AdWords account and go from there. But yeah, thank you both for answering that.
Hey, Jen, what happened to Ask Jeeves? Is that still around?
I'm not sure. Maybe some people use it. I'll have to look into that because I remember that well. Okay, a couple more while we still have some time here. So for Josh, how easy is it to implement new software into the practice, and how do you get staff on board with that?
Yeah, so I think, it's not very difficult to implement, software. A lot of institutions and practices have already done it. I think the difficult part is evaluating what your needs are and ensuring you've chosen the right partner to accomplish that. So, how we work is typically, if you're using a system, we will go and try to replicate a lot of the things that you like within that system as kind of a first stage to get you running really quickly. And then it's about phasing in additional layers of communication towards the areas of the business that need the biggest support. So for a lot of institutions or practices, it's really around, okay, we need to do the reminders and confirmations. And you know what? We also want to do a feedback form and we want to do surveys. And, it's about working with your partner to build an action plan that prioritizes the things that are of the largest urgency for you and that's taking up the largest amount of time. For a lot of practices, there is no feedback loop currently. So my recommendation would be to embed that right away. Like Charlie mentioned, you can't correct what isn't being measured. And a lot of times you will be in disbelief at the results that you are seeing because you're not measuring it. And I think a lot of that comes in through creating and embedding those feedback loops into your regular processes. So it's not a difficult thing, but it is something that you do want to consider the right partner. And you want to ensure that they have the ability to serve all of your needs. This is definitely not a one size fits all. It's your practice has individual needs that need to be accomplished, and you want to find a partner that can work with you today and tomorrow and in the future on how those needs evolve.
Great, thank you. And we just have one question, last one here for Charlie, and it's around, like handling new patients. Is it better to have dedicated people handling new patients, or should it be more of a shared responsibility of all the front desk staff?
Ooh, I get asked that a lot. So I would say if you can, and you have the people, like I think specializing this role certainly has benefits. Because people can get really focused on it, and it's a little easier to streamline and control the quality. But there are many practices that don't have either the staff or the infrastructure to do that, and so it's shared responsibility amongst their team that do really well. So it is not impossible to do well, but if you have the opportunity to choose between the two, I would recommend specializing. One other element I'll mention specifically with web leads, when people are filling out web leads, like when your office is closed and then you get in the next business day, and whether it's in the email inbox or whatever you have, and you tell your whole team like, hey guys, when we get in, let's all go in and look at the web leads and follow up. You don't want to do that. You need to make that somebody's specific responsibility, or maybe assign days for that of the week, because it's the old adage, like if it's everyone's responsibility, it's nobody's. So different things like the web leads, think through that to make sure that, people aren't assuming that someone else is going to do it.
Great, thank you. So that concludes all of the questions and our discussion here today. So thank you all for attending. If you want to keep in touch and want to learn more about Intiveo and Liine, you can reach us here, so on our websites or by phone. Also, we have some handy QR codes here. If you take out your camera on your phone and you zoom in, a link should pop up that you can click to to take you to the website there. So you can have that as well. We will be following up with the recording of this webinar so that you can share it with your colleagues and staff. But yeah, that wraps it up for today. So thank you, everyone. I hope you have a beautiful day.
See you all later. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Enjoyed it.